light of this story, this experience, how has that changed me? And that is, I really feel like it's a Holy Spirit moment.
We have to know what they care about, what they value, what matters to them. One of our advantages is we are the audience.
And if we can bring messages to them through trusted voices, what if some of those voices actually are connected to the causes that they already support?
Hello, and welcome to the Liberty Spenders podcast. We are Kurt and Kristen Ludhart, your hosts and co-founders of the Prosper Group, an agency that's raised over $500 million and helped elect over 100 members of Congress, 15 governors, 15 U.S. senators, and 1 president. And now, in addition to helping political candidates get elected, we're helping your business get elected by answering this question. What if you could exponentially grow your business by tapping into a lucrative and engaged audience we call Liberty Spenders, which are faith-based and conservative consumers, and they're looking to buy from businesses and brands that reflect their values. If you want to learn more about that, we've just launched a new book, and you can get at it for free on our website, libertyspenders.com/free.
Our guests today are Bob Elder and Brian Lange. I should have asked beforehand, Brian. Okay, perfect. And they are with Collide Media Group. Bob is an industry leader in faith-based entertainment. He's been navigating this media marketplace for the last 35 years. You wouldn't guess it, though. He looks like maybe 14 years only in the business. He founded Collide Media Group in 2016 with a mission to elevate media that inspires a deeper relationship with Christ. Brian's the president at Collide Media Group. He spent his entire career building and executing significant strategic partnerships in the faith and media marketplace. Prior to co-founding Collide Media Group, Brian served at Word Entertainment and Propeller Consulting. He runs the day-to-day operation of Collide's marketing, distribution, and production divisions. He's managed dozens of campaigns and contributed to, believe it or not, over 100 film campaigns. We're excited to have Brian and Ben and Bob on today. Thanks.
Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, I got to tell you sound like a couple of slouches. I don't know who we're talking to on this podcast, but man, I gotta up our game. Seriously, what an honor. We're really excited to be chatting with you. And both Kurt and I will try not to fan out, but what you do for a living is just really exciting. And so we cannot wait to dive into all of that with you. So truly, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I've been excited because I've known of Collide before, just having been someone who consumes Christian movies and films. And I am certain I've probably participated in some of your marketing campaigns. And so just excited to have you guys on. I'm absolutely fascinated by it. There's just been a number of big successes also recently in the area of Christian film and faith-friendly films. I just feel like we're emerging into perhaps a moment of a big wave of this kind of stuff coming out. And you guys are right in the middle of it. What's been your experience in the last few years as you've been doing work in this space? Are you seeing kind of the same thing we're seeing with just a lot of cool, new, exciting, really awesome faith films coming out?
We are definitely crescendoing. That's how it feels recently, Kurt. And I feel like there's more in front of us than behind us. I know we often look at what we've participated in, the games we've played already, but I'm most excited about the games yet to be played. And some of those we don't know. They're just glimpses at this point. And some of them we do know. They're very active. They're campaigns that we're working on of things that will be coming to market in 2025. We're very excited about because of how it impacts the audience. Impact is what we care about. We're very focused on our mission statement, which you shared, of elevating media that inspires a deeper relationship with Christ. However, the way that we do that is really to come alongside ministries that are already actively pushing forward the causes that that believers really care about. And by bringing those ministries along and getting them involved in this multi-million dollar media industry, it really gives them an opportunity to connect with something that's culturally relevant. And that is an opportunity to further the impact. So yes, we want to see people go to movie theaters or tune into their streaming subscription services, and we want them to consume faith content. But more importantly, we want that content to be given the opportunity to do what God intended, which is to change our hearts. And that deeper relationship with Christ is what we've focused on, and it's a big part of what drives us and gets us to work every day. We have the pleasure of doing these things. We often say we're blessed to be able to do that. However, we don't take that for granted, and we're constantly looking for ahead in the marketplace for new ways to connect to people. And goodness, we're students of the marketplace as well. There's a lot of things that are constantly changing, and we watch that, and we're careful to skate to the puck, if you will. However, we wouldn't suggest at any time that we figured anything out. We're constantly learning on consumer behavior and what's really affecting people. But honestly, for us, it comes down to what we would describe as missional impact. How can this media not only be an entertaining experience, but how can we as believers take this as a way of really evangelizing the world or edifying our walk and certainly becoming more Christ-like?
Well, I love how you put that crescendoing. That's a great descriptor. And I know that, again, from us following this space and alternative media outlets and just the avenues that are available to all of us to get access to this content, that's what's so exciting, is because it makes that even more possible. It makes it easier to get the word out. It makes it easier for people to find the type of content that they want to consume. And so that, again, it's amazing. And the fact that you're focused on that, I'm sure has got to be pretty fulfilling, not just on getting it out to market, but of course, making sure the content itself is doing its job, right? Doing what its intended purpose is. So, Brian, how would you describe it? We listed off your background. Anything you'd want to add to that in terms of the trends of what you've been seeing in the last few years?
I would just say that there's no shortage of opportunities and content and stories that need to be told. And the audience and the demand for those stories is there. And we kind of have to live in both of those worlds to surface those and really bring them together. Collide is defined as two elements in motion that come together to make an impact. The elements, it's content and consumer. And just like you shared, they're always moving. The way we consume now is different than 2 years ago, 5 years ago. And where our consumer is just in the overall marketplace, a lot of times, we say faith-based films, and there's the big tent poles, whether it's I Can Only Imagine or Facing the Giants or Fireproof. Those audiences that launched those films, they're in a different place, right? So the way we consume is different, and our audience base is changing. And so how do we find them? We get to be experts in really two completely different worlds. We have to know and understand the nuance of theatrical marketing and distribution in the studio systems and those budgets and how that system works. And this is equally, if not more important, we have to know the audience, right? We have to know what they care about, what they value, what matters to them. And oftentimes we feel, one of our advantages is we are the audience. Right. So we get to live in both worlds and really help bridge that content to that consumer. They're always changing, but when they collide, when they make that impact, it's really where we feel called to serve in the marketplace. And when we can do that well, high five, pat our backs, and then, okay, Lord, on to the next one. Like, what's that next story? Have no idea what that's going to be, but we get to participate in that.
Yeah, I think you're really right about the moving target piece. Mm-hmm. If I look at my own personal experience, when 2020 hit, we'd had two big life changes for us. Obviously, COVID was really interrupting movie theater and what was happening in the movie business. But we also had our first kid in 2020. Mm-hmm. And so both, they kind of shut down the movie theaters for a little while. And then, of course, now I feel like to get to a movie theater in the evening, one, it requires 2 cups of coffee because I'm already exhausted by 7:30. And I was like, I got to get a babysitter. Are they willing to stay till 11 o'clock? And we used to go to the theater all the time.
Regularly.
Right? We probably too much. And now we don't. But we're consuming on our streaming platforms when we can sneak away from the kids,
Say, even that's pretty rare. If someone were to ask me what's hot now, I don't know. But I do know when films of importance are coming out.
Yeah.
Right. Especially faith driven, again, because they know how to reach me again, which is why it's so exciting, why we're so excited to talk to you guys.
Yeah. Well, because I think the last film we saw in theater was Sound of Freedom. Mm-hmm. And I was really excited when you mentioned, as we were warming up, about Bonhoeffer, which by the time this episode comes out will have been in theaters for a while. But I'm the guy who's read the book and not seen the movie yet. But I've read Metaxas's book about Bonhoeffer and found it incredibly challenging as a person of faith, and thinking about exactly what he was going through in that environment and the courage. His book itself, I think, The Cost of Discipleship, right? And it's such a challenge as a person of faith to think, what would I have done if my life was in danger? And I have never had to face that. But it sounds like an exciting story and an exciting film to be coming out that you guys are involved in.
And it's a gripping story. And, oftentimes, I'm going to make a generalization here. There's an assumption that faith-based film equates with lower quality, equates with a certain cheese factor, right? And let's just put that out there because there's an association there.
Well, I think it's an association that's been probably mostly true for some time, because we didn't have the infrastructure and the support to get that done, and that again,
correct.
All of those things matter. It's not because the content or the stories are lesser than. I think we just haven't had the infrastructure set up so that we could fund and give these stories what they deserve, to be able to be produced well. And so I'm sorry to cut you off there, Brian, but that has been true. And we need to defeat that stereotype because it is not true.
And what an opportunity with this crescendo. We're seeing films like Bonhoeffer, right? We're seeing really world-class cinematographers and script writers jumping in and helping lead to these stories. We have, the development and growth of the Wonder Project and everything that's happening there. Obviously, Dallas and 5 and 2 studios, right? There's so much more on the resource side to go along with the richness of the stories, but we're coming alongside now. I always say, hey, does it pass the eye test, right? Not knowing what the film is about. Is this on par with other content that's competing for the same eyeballs? And we're there. Right. And that's really exciting for us because not only is it the missional cause, but there's a legitimacy of, we are warranted to have a seat at this table. We are producing high quality art, high quality stories that is entertaining in addition to edifying, uplifting, and everything else.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better myself. And again, I'm sorry for that interruption, but I just, it's wonderful to see these shifts and to see this type of content be told in a way that, again, is reflective of the quality of the story itself.
Now, I'm just fascinated by the business in general. So I'm just kind of curious about what's that look like in the case of Bonhoeffer, as you were sharing earlier, it sounds like the film's been done for a while, right? But what's that go-to-market thing look like once they show up and say, "Hey, Collide, we've got this great story I want to get in theaters, or I want to have on streamers." What's that process look like? How does it go to market?
We describe it, Kurt, as the two miracles of film. The first miracle is that a film is made. And if you've ever made a film, you understand what that means. It takes such a village of people. While any one of us can hold up our iPhone and shoot something, that's not the same as making a film. And so the work that goes in to get a film made, when you do see a movie in the theaters, there's always that little extra time when the credits roll. And you see all those names go by. Depending on the size of the film, there might be more names, right? Well, that really honors everyone who is a part of that village and making that film, and we care deeply about that. I never leave a theater before the end of the credit roll because I understand the work and the sacrifice that goes in to that from the filmmaking side. The second miracle of film is that a film gets released because there are a lot of films that get made. But they don't have the opportunity to be released into the marketplace. And it's a competitive marketplace. There's a finite number of movie theater screens that films can be exhibited on. And there's a finite amount of time that people have. And so even as you all describe what it's been like for the last few years with young kids, you've moved your demo, and the target is a little bit different than it was maybe 10 years ago, where you were very active in your movie going experience into theaters, but now you're consuming, through streaming. And so we look at that movie release part and have respect and understand the miracle that it takes to release a movie. And part of that is really finding the audience for the movie. One of the things that we always think about is who's going to be first in line on Friday night, or now everything opens on Thursday, right? But who's going to buy their ticket first? Who's going to be first in line, and why? And so if we can focus in on that first in line consumer, the early adopter of that particular movie, and understand what motivates them and how do we serve them and connect with them, that will lead to a better experience for the film in the marketplace long term. So I often will say to a filmmaker, would you rather have a movie theater that is full of people you tricked into seeing it but don't like it, or would you rather have a movie theater that's only half full, but it's half full? It's the top 100 people that love your movie, and they're going to now go out. And of course, it's really obvious who we want there. And we often say that our job as marketers is really to open the film. It then becomes the film's job to extend that. And so in movie releasing, we often look at the average like dollars per screen. We look at the number of screens it goes out on and what the opening weekend is and how high of a watermark it hits. And is it number, 1, 2, 3, 4? Those things really matter because they then step into the culture more broadly, and people talk about them, and that helps, get the word out there. But the best is the word of mouth. It's the multiple. It's the people that go to see it on opening weekend, love it. They go do their Rotten Tomatoes, 100% audience score, and they tell everybody about it. And that really, even the most successful opening weekends aren't enough to carry a film throughout its life cycle. So the story that we can help create with opening weekend is a big part of the film's experience in the marketplace and how people know about it and what they care about it. Then there's one other thing I have to throw in, and it's the context. How you see a film.
Yeah.
If you have watched a film on your phone, or we get to see films early all the time, but we have to watch them carefully because we don't watch them with an audience. Often we're watching them on our laptop at night. And it's not the same experience as when you see this film with its intended audience with a group of people. And so that context in which you see it really matters, because ultimately films are subjective. Media and all art is subjective. We all know if we're in a museum and you're looking at, what do you see? Like, what's your perspective? Well, the same thing happens with the film. Think about the times that you have seen a film and perhaps seen it with someone who loved it or hated it, and how that impacted how you felt about it.
I was just doing that as you were talking.
I know. What's the first question we ask when we leave a film? What'd you think? To the person we went to the film with. It might be our spouse, but it might be our neighbor. It might be somebody. And what I love about Christian films is they provide this opportunity for a conversation of deep, meaningful things that's really, really safe, because you get to do it in context of the story and the experience of it. And when we can get the right people into the theater, and they are absolutely the audience for that film, it's very satisfying to see that carry out in, they call it a multiple, how the film does over time compared to opening weekend. Or perhaps it's how the film is rated and what people say about it, how they talk about it. My favorite rating is not Rotten Tomatoes. That's great. We capture a lot of people there saying they give their popcorn score, right? But it's a service called CinemaScore. CinemaScore gives a letter grade for how the film performed on opening night. And what it says, it gives A minus, B, B plus, all the way to C's and D's. But what it says is, it says not only something about the objective value of the film and how people think about it, but it says who was there, because they capture that rating. They capture the cinema score by the Friday night audience, and it's a random collection. So they have theaters around the country, and it's a service. So not all movies get a cinema score. You, as a distributor of a movie, a studio, has to participate in that and ask for a cinema score to be given. And what it says is, the movie is an experience for the right audience. So those that get an A+ cinema score, it may not mean I love that movie, but the audience that saw that movie loved that movie. And that says something about the people that marketed it and got that audience into the theater. So because it gives a little bit of credit towards the marketers, we're big fans of CinemaScore.
Yeah.
No. That's funny. Well, you've got a vested interest. So you have to participate in it. So the people that watch, they're participating then and going in and rating. Just to clarify,
it's an exit survey. It's like polls at an election.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an exit survey. Yep.
Well, that's a great comparison. We know.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing sounds similar. When you market for a candidate, you have a one-day sale, right? And a little bit of what you're talking about, as you need to for a movie to be successful, you need to have a good opening weekend, right? So that's the big day.
It is. There's a lot of similarities, Kurt. Every movie that we have marketed, we have called a campaign, and we do that for a reason. We talk about getting out the vote. It's just a vote and a movie ticket versus what election poll we capture.
Absolutely.
Now, is it generally opening weekend is always the top weekend, and then it's you hit your top? Very rarely does it go higher.
Very rarely.
Yeah.
Traditionally, and there's always exceptions. You want to see, we see anywhere from a 40 to 60% drop weekend number 1, weekend number 2, assuming screen counts maintain. There's all these different variables, but on average, napkin math, you could assume a 50% drop from subsequent weekends where you're dropping your lower performing theaters. And a multiple, that's the legs, it's take opening weekend. Could be anywhere from 2.5 upwards of 4. The A+ cinema score, you expect to have a 4-time plus multiple, as opposed to an A-, which might just be a 2.5% multiple. So a lot of what we do, it's part art and part science. There's so much data. There's so much historical data that we have. It's wild when you look at the projections and And, you look at the pre-sales on what's tracking with Fandango, on other similar comps that are also sequels of this kind of movie that's rated PG-13. It's wild how accurate some of those can be. However, within the faith space, it's more murky. The tracking is not as pinpointed, right? So there's a lot more of a mystery, so to speak, on how these films are going to open. However, as it relates to legs and multiples, oftentimes a faith film can overextend, right? Over index what a traditional film might have. And really what a lot of people say is you got to see it opening weekend, because that does impact so much. A lot of times it's assumed that once a film opens in theaters, okay, it's done, right? You've crossed the finish line. But really, that's the beginning of the life cycle of this film out active in the marketplace for people to consume. It really is the tip of a spear on how that film can be monetized, how the various investments can be returned. In our mind, it's the beginning of lives being able to be impacted. And the higher that watermark is, exhibition, they're not in the business to sell movie tickets. They're in the business to sell Coke and popcorn, right? So when you have a high opening weekend, when you have the right number of theaters to the right number of box office, and it's a good per screen average, one of the industry terms, that tells a narrative. That says where this film was booked, people wanted to go see it. So if I'm a theater, I'm going to look at that per screen average and say, wow, people care about this movie. Maybe I should keep it a little longer. Or a theater that didn't book it in, wow, look at how many people went and saw that. I need to bring it in for this weekend number 2. And sometimes you have some films, probably most recently like The Forge from Sony Affirm and the Kendrick brothers. The screen count on weekend number 2 was higher than opening weekend. So that's an example of it releasing. I think it was 1,800 screens. Weekend number 2, there were more theaters added, right? Because they're looking at how was this received out into the marketplace. I need bodies in my theater so I can sell them Coke and popcorn. And then it goes on to home entertainment and downstream and streaming, and where you can set the highest watermark, that sets you up for a greater downstream, throughout the life cycle of the film.
So I love how you described that. And we're going to get into this because, again, part of the reason why this is such a great topic for us to talk about is I know there's a lot we can learn, again, when we're talking about Liberty spenders and how to market to an audience of people that are, driven by faith messaging or conservative messaging. And so I want to get into a little bit of how you've done that when you talk about finding audiences. But I also think what's great is for our listeners to hear this and just recognize, once again, the power that you have to influence and to build upon the success of recent pictures and content releases. Even when we're looking at The Chosen, that series. I mean, there's so many people who've been exposed to that and through that success. So I'd love for people to, try to glean from this in terms of how they can be thinking differently or learning from you and what you do when you're releasing a movie. But also, I hope to encourage anybody who's listening or watching this episode to recognize you deciding to support a film on opening weekend, what that does, to your point, to the life cycle of that. So for all of us to try to make an extra emphasis to find a way to get that sitter or do what needs to be done to support this great content. So talk a little bit about that. When you're looking into those audiences and you're trying to market and advertise, tell us a little bit about how you go about doing that.
Yep. Our favorite approach is to find what influences. We find a target audience. We define that based on who we believe will be most impacted and most likely to carry this message on. And we like to then take that profile or target and build the lifestyle around them, really focused on the ministry that they are involved in. So when a film's credits roll, that's a point at which there's I really feel like it's a Holy Spirit moment. I feel like it's a time when we have experienced a filmmaker's journey. We've consumed this whole experience. And if we don't have to jump up and run to the restroom, but we're just going to take a moment there and just reflect for a second. That reflection point, I like to call this the so what moment. And by so what, I mean, it's so what am I going to do? Now, in light of this story, this experience, how has that changed me? And that is, I really feel like it's a Holy Spirit moment. So we focus in on that moment. We look at what the cause, the missional cause of the film is, and then we surround that target consumer. We come alongside all their participation. That might be in their local church and how they're participating in their local church. It might be in the ministries that they're involved with. It might be the social media or just how they consume other content, places where they are. So across the marketplace, whether it's PR or straight advertising, it's a matter of focusing in on that core consumer. Who is the best customer for it? And if we can bring messages to them through trusted voices, influencers, as we call them in today's market, trusted voices that they believe in. What if some of those voices actually are connected to the causes that they already support? So bringing alongside a ministry that's involved in the same cause as the content, the movie content, is really valuable. It not only does it help put in context what this message is and encourage somebody to participate and go to the theater, it also is this connection for what we would call the call to action afterwards. So now out of that so what moment, I'm motivated. Well, if I heard about this through a ministry that is carrying out the message of this movie, I'm going back to that ministry and I'm upping my participation and I'm saying, wow, let's go. This is awesome. The movie Sound of Freedom you mentioned earlier is a great example of that. That is a film with a very strong cause that Christians resonate with in a big way. And so the the awareness that it generated, that's great for awareness, but what does that actually mean? I believe that people participated more greatly in anti-trafficking and took up the cause with their local anti-trafficking organization and ministry. And we saw that happen. Our involvement with that movie was definitely related to all the ministry side and all the church side. And we saw churches using Sound of Freedom as a way of furthering the anti-trafficking cause in their local marketplace, which is amazing. And we have evidences of people actually raising money towards their local anti-trafficking cause by using the Sound of Freedom as a ministry tool to raise awareness. And those are the things that we get excited about because it's closer to the life change, the life impact, the heart change, which is why these stories are being told. It's really the filmmaker's passion to tell these stories for a reason, not just to entertain people, but really to affect how people might see a particular cause or purpose that God has called them to. So we get to participate in that all the way through. And when we line those up, that is, Brian always says, our job's done. Once we've got that ministry locked up with the content, then we're like, okay, we're done. Go, go use it for ministry impact.
I'll tell you, Sound of Freedom was inspiring for us to donate to some organizations. But I'll tell you, my first call to action was to come home, hug my kids, and never let go. It was so powerful in that regard. There were a few moments and I thought, I don't know that I can watch this. But it did achieve what its outcome, which is you leave having a greater understanding of what people go through and the dangers that many face in our world. And so I can see the kind of connective tissue you're putting together there.
Mm-hmm. And if we use that film as a good example, because we've talked about it on our podcast, and there's a lot's been written about it, and that kind of pay it forward campaign and all of those things that help to make that successful. Can you give some tangible examples? I really want to try to break this down. Can you give some examples of what you mean when you've talked about tying in ministry. Because again, I'm trying to relate this to business owners and what they can do to put together those audiences or strategic partnerships, joint ventures, because there's a lot of similarities in how we can do this and create that alignment to help execute a mission or a business's product or service to a consumer.
Yeah, I'll take that. Oftentimes when we approach and what that is, we view it as strategic partnerships, right? And we get to be Switzerland, okay? And I share that, we're a neutral third party between the content and the ministry on the ground. Another example I use is we get to be a matchmaker, where we point to this content that's coming to the marketplace and say, hey, organization, this content is coming and it's touching on something that you care about, that you exist to help address or move forward or advance. And we view partnerships through 3 different lenses: mission match, reach, and relationship. All right, so first I'll start with relationship. Is this a ministry or an organization that we have an existing relationship connection to? Whether it's Bill Davis, who oversees our partnership work, or myself or Bob, we've been active in this media ministry world for quite some time. So there's lots of relationships that we know. Second is reach. How does this organization reach its audience, right? Is it a big nationwide organization where everything is top down from the mothership? Is it decentralized, where it's a lot of independent networks and we could talk to someone in Columbus, Ohio, but they don't have any say on what happens in Orlando, Florida? Or is it hyper regional or hyper local? Is this just the passion project of somebody in Ames, Iowa, that is just going to own that city and only touch that city and knows that city? So there's lots of different ways that organizations reach their audience. And then the most important is mission match. Is this something that if we were to share without any context, they would get it, right? Like, oh my gosh, I understand the vision casting. I understand the opportunity, and I understand how I can take this and use it to further my own ministry impact. That's what we want. And when we develop these partners, well, when we identify them that have the mission match, we understand the reach, and we have the relationship, then it's okay, well, what makes sense? Another thing that I always say, it's not these ministries' job to promote a film. That's not their job. That's not why they were established. But if there are instances where this film can help them achieve their goals, how can we do that? How can you use this to leverage to create community events, to create a deeper relationship with your audience? Or, and sometimes, how can you use this to be a tastemaker to your audience? Oftentimes, I want to be the first person to share this, right? Hey, you're hearing this for the first time from our voice, and it's relevant because of that missional connection. We don't go to all of our ministry partner relationships with every film we're talking about, because that would be inconsiderate to the audience. I only want to talk to those that are active in human trafficking with films that touch human trafficking, right? If I have a film that's about mentorship and discipleship, those are the organizations and ministries that I want to go deep with, because they're going to get it. Oftentimes we try to nicheify. Let's get as specific as possible on who that niche audience is. Going back to what Bob said, who's the first 100 people in line? Let's go find them, find the organizations that care about that. And then we call it an MOU, a partnership overview. It's right sizing the relationship and agreement. What are some ways where we can add value to you? And what are some things that we're looking for? Communication, promotion, endorsement, what have you. And then that's where, then we try to get out of the way, right? We're the matchmaker. We're facilitating the promotion. We're holding hands. Hey, you committed to do this action. Were you able to do it? What was the response? And oftentimes when those things line up, we're getting more promotional support than we initially asked for because of the results that we're seeing on the ground. So
yeah, that's great.
We feel in general, there is no competition. There's only collaboration. And we take that approach with the films and the organizations and not try to force something that doesn't fit. We do a lot of listening. There could be content that we think is a match, but might not be, right? So we want to listen and be cognizant of that. Partnership might not work for film A, but in 6 months we might be working on something where we can build something.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I just think, again, there's a lot of parallels. And we talk about with our clients that are interested in pursuing this strategy, we call it conviction-driven marketing, and we have our 5P system. When we talk about the product rollout plan, we talk about this ecosystem and how powerful it is that you can leverage, again, knowing the right influencers, tastemakers, and how do you, use that, again, to get the word out about your product or service. And so, again, it's why I appreciate you breaking that down for us, because again, there's a lot to be learned in terms of how to utilize this strategy, and businesses can do the same thing.
Well, I also wanted to take a moment because you guys aren't just here marketing and sharing the story of your clients and the films that you're working with, but you've also created sort of a repository for faith films in general, and faithfilmfan.com. And I wanted you guys to talk about that some.
Absolutely. We started Faith Film Fan because we were talking to our friends and people in our community groups and about the films that we're working on. And often we get the response, how do I find out about that? And then you have the moment where you're like, wait a second, that's my job. I'm the marketer. You're supposed to know about it. But we only have limited time and money for, all these films. Last year in 2023, there were 46 different movies that came into movie theaters that you would call a faith film, released to the faith, marketed to the faith audience.
Wow.
This year, it looks like we're going to have about 42. And I hope that next year, that is still in that strong number of films. It's very exciting because there's more options for all of us, and amongst all of them, we get to experience God's love through media, and then use all of that as ministry to further the kingdom. Really, the bigger cause that we're all on board for. So media is such a big part of it, and each film only has a limited amount of time and money. And so in response to our friends and family, we realized that there was not one place where you can go and find out about all the Christian movies coming to market. And we decided we would start with just the ones that will have a theatrical release. That's a good, safe place to start. So whenever we find one that's been announced, we put it on our new release schedule at faithfilmfan.com. And then also we started a podcast and have had a little better than 50 episodes, where we've interviewed the filmmakers, or maybe the talent involved, or perhaps the writers or directors, people involved in making it. It's very insightful to kind of hear from, because each one, as I said earlier, it's a miracle. And to hear those stories of who's behind it and why they did it, we really feel like that's very important. And we've experienced that in the marketplace, and we love offering that out to audiences. And then, of course, anyone that wants to get involved in making Christian films is a great place for them to learn more about that as well. But there's some other things that we do at Faith Film Fan, but really it's a public service to help the entire industry. Let's all gather and support each of these movies, whether it's the best Christmas pageant ever or Bonhoeffer. They both really matter. They're very different experiences, but they're both awesome movies, and we want everybody to know about it. And there'll be a bunch of those in 25 as well.
Yeah,
and we'll make sure that's in our show notes for this episode. But again, it is faithfilmfan.com, and it's so exciting because all the release dates, again, for whatever faith films you know about, the release dates will be there, so we can go there again and help support these amazing movies. And I'm excited about the podcast because, as you told us about, speaking to the producers and people behind Bonhoeffer, for example, and how that had been basically carried for 12 years before finally getting to see this exciting release. So I think that's going to be a great thing for people to check out as well. And happy that you guys are supporting that. And I think you said it's been 2 years since you launched that website.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yep. This year we added series to it with The Chosen and some of the other things that are coming in early 25. House of David's going to make a big impact. We want to be talking about those things as well, because the major streamers are starting to recognize faith. And we're covering not only the theatrical releases, which is what we started with, but we're now covering series because it's a big part of our consuming. You mentioned The Chosen earlier. It's amazing, and in early 25, it will have a theatrical launch experience of season 5, which is very exciting, and we want as many people to know about that as possible. So that's a place where we'll be talking about what's coming as it's coming to market.
Well, I'll be bookmarking it.
As with Bonhoeffer, that's one. The Chosen is one where I've read the book first.
It's good. You're so good. He's so knowledge. You get that.
That was a good joke. I just thought of that. I am excited about the best Christmas pageant ever. I've seen. I keep getting presented with the trailer for it, which leads me to a very important question. I love the movie The Holiday, and Cameron Diaz is the woman who makes all the trailers. If you've ever seen the movie The Holiday, that's her specialty. She makes the trailers for movies. She makes bad movies seem good. She puts all the sizzle in. So as the marketing firm, are you guys making the trailers, or is that somebody else?
Yeah, we're not cutting.
Well, the studio projects, sometimes we get input, sometimes it's, that's what it's going to be. Great. But there are.
I saw some squirming there, Bob. Kind of squirming in your chair a little bit.
A couple of bad trailers.
No. Well, a trailer is really important. I love trailers because they're a condensed, sort of taste of what you're going to experience in the movie. At least that's their intention. Their intention fully is to sell the movie. Our job is to sell something that you don't get to consume until opening day. So that's where we kind of get out the votes a little bit different, because hopefully who you're voting for. You may not know what movie you're going into. And a trailer is a way that helps indicate that. And a trailer can oversell. You probably have heard of or seen scenes in trailers that are not in the actual film, where the trailer was cut and whatever scene was included wasn't actually in the film. That actually does happen. But our philosophy is that a trailer should be a half step above the film. And the half step is very aspirational. And it would be a little more honest to be exactly equal with the film, but it's a trailer, people. We want it to sizzle, right? We want it to sell. And so that's where I give room for a half step. If it's a half step below, it has undersold. Like if it's like, I didn't get it with that trailer, but that film was awesome. Oops, we didn't do very well, right? And if it's a full step above, then maybe you've overpromised. So I'm a big one to suggest that a half step is what we're looking for. We want to be aspirational, and we want to be emotional. That's I love watching movie trailers in movie theaters. It's just like the best 2.5 minutes where you got the Dolby surround sound Atmos coming at you on all sides, and you just feel the trailer. It's a business. There is a business of trailering for sure. We know that that's a part of this, and we want to be honest with the trailer. And we wanted to attract the right audience, back to our conversation before. Yeah. So we do really believe in the value of trailers, and music becomes a big part of that as well because of the emotional side.
Yeah.
Well, some of our favorite things to listen to are movie soundtracks. And I've now trained my kids. They're the same way. And I don't just mean, songs where they can sing along. They like listening to the actual soundtrack, the score. Yeah. Yes. And they'll say, this is when this is happening. And it's amazing. Our kids are 2.5 and 4. And they they can tell you, and it's incredible, especially because we don't actually let them watch that much TV or screen time, but it really resonates with them. And so, and I got to tell you, Bob, I completely agree with you. And we need to go see some films together because I am the same. I love good trailers, and we've definitely experienced the gamut, right? Everyone's been where you watch a trailer and we're trying to decide, do we want to go to see that movie? And we've not, seen any of the advertising, and you watch the trailer and you just think sometimes, who wants to see that? Not me.
I'm still mad at Adam Sandler over Spanglish, right? Because the trailer was a comedy, right? You think Adam Sandler, you think comedy. There was a bunch of comedic moments in the trailer, and then you get there and it's a deathly serious movie. And I felt lied to.
I still remember, I think my favorite trailer is Everest. I don't know if y'all remember that film. The trailer for Everest was amazing.
Well, I'll have to go check it out.
That's the one with where they're climbing, right? With
well, I would hope so. With the name of
yes,
Everest.
well, of course, but they're.
Sure.
I think I remember it. They, now, but I'll have to check it out.
Came out about 10 years ago. I still vividly remember the first time I saw the trailer. I think it was in the office, and I'm pretty sure I said, you guys have to come watch this trailer. It was just, that action, thrilling, so much suspense. It was, that could be some homework. Go watch the Everest trailer.
Yeah. Well, it's a special skill. You're right. It's very different, from a political campaign ad.
Well, it's the same challenge. It's a lot harder to write something short than long, right? And I find that has to be the difficulty of a trailer. How do you condense a story into 30 seconds or a minute or sometimes shorter even? But this has all been super fascinating. I could go on for another 45 minutes, but what I'd like to do now that we're getting a little close on time is to get into some fun lightning round questions. I always love to ask people what the legacy they're looking to leave behind from their activities would be.
Ooh, who wants to go first?
Yeah. Ooh, okay, I'll jump in. It is it's the next generation, Kurt. I'm 59, and I've had the pleasure of being around a lot of Christian entertainment. The faith film industry, Christian films, is really about a 25 year experience here. I was already working before Christian films started coming into theaters, and I was working in Christian media. And what I realize is we have always served our Christian audience with the hope or aspiration of that going out further to reach non-believers. It's a big part of why Christian media exists, is because it's a way to articulate for our faith and ourselves something that's harder to share. So we use it as a tool, and that is really important. If we're not reaching the next generation, a younger generation, then we're perhaps missing it. So I've always, my whole career, been drawn to a younger generation. And I really do believe that we have, it's an opportunity for legacy, but I also feel like it's a responsibility. So that's why we're involved with, we have started producing some things. And one of the things that we shot this year that will come out in 25 is an episodic series. It's a comedy series called The Promised Land. It's the story of Moses and the Israelites wandering in the desert, which we know from the word. However, we've never seen it from a comedy angle. It's told in a Parks and Rec or Office style. So imagine a documentary film crew following Moses and the tribes of Israel, learning leadership as they wander the desert, getting their daily manna. It's extremely funny. It's extremely creative. And it's created by a bunch of younger next generation creatives who have been working on The Chosen for the last 7 years. And so seeing something like that come to market and being a part of reaching a younger generation to get to engage their hearts more deeply in God's word and to live that out is absolutely a legacy that we want to continue to lead.
Sure.
I think you buried the lead there. That sounds like
it's
like a really fun
We'll throw it in the show
project.
notes. Yeah.
Yes, we will.
Pilot, we put the pilot online for free, so you can go watch the first episode, and you can determine yourself. But we've
writing
got
it down.
The way to Kurt's heart is through comedy.
We have a huge audience response on it, which is why we moved into the production of it this year.
That sounds great, and I suspect, not that we're going to go way down on Promised Land, but one of the challenges as a person of faith is sometimes I grew up in the church. You read about Moses, you read about the Israelites, and I've always been it wasn't until I was much later that I fully appreciated how someone like the Israelites, despite all the miracles, could choose not to follow God. And I was always confused by it. Isn't this obvious? You're getting manna from the sky. Like, why wouldn't why wouldn't you just do? How is it that all these miracles happen and Moses goes up in the mountain for a little while, you come back and you're worshiping a golden calf? That seems so like surreal. And it wasn't until I was adult and could see sort of the metaphor in my own life that I said, okay, yeah, I get it. They weren't stupid. If they were, I'm stupid too. And so I have a feeling that presenting it like Parks and Rec might be exactly the right way it should be presented.
The way I like to give context for a generation that grew up on the VeggieTales, right, as kids, and then discovered The Office and Parks and Rec as adults, it brings those two experiences together.
Yeah. Well, where is my hairbrush, right?
I wasn't raised on VeggieTales, so I don't know. I didn't watch it.
I'm a little old for VeggieTales, but I remember.
Maybe you, Brian, but not me. I didn't.
So maybe we'll give Brian lightning round question 2. What's a topic, something that's been grabbing your interest recently, other than your work at Collide, something maybe hobby wise or that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I love baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan. I grew up in St. Louis, so I'm an avid Cardinal fan. My wife and I just took a trip up to Boston, and there's a 3-part documentary series on Netflix called The Comeback, and it tells the story of the 03-04 Boston Red Sox. And to watch that with Moneyball and Theo Epstein and the integration of sabermetrics and the inner workings of Alex Rodriguez and where he was at Texas, and he almost came to Boston, but he ended up going to New York. Like I love unpacking that just as a fan, and also as a dad who has 3 boys that are baseball obsessed. I feel like I'm a baseball romantic. It's such a beautiful picture of how life is. Calls are gonna go your way that shouldn't. You're not gonna get calls that you should. There's the grind, there's showing up, there's hustle. And I know we're so far from spring training, but I did a deep dive into that 3-part doc series over the last couple nights.
Well, maybe you can help me appreciate baseball more, because what I have learned through friends of mine that are fans, as you are, is you really have to, maybe this is an incorrect assumption on my part, but I feel like you really have to understand the mechanics of the game in order to fully enjoy and appreciate it. I mean, otherwise I'm just like, oh, this is so slow, and I can appreciate.
There's so much nuance,
but there's so much to it, even in the, and the who's pitching and the relief and right-handed, left-handed, and the sequence and the order.
Oh, absolutely. The lineups and the strategy, the hit and runs. And with the new rules, you've got more stealing. It's great, and I have a lot of fun with it. And just the idea of sabermetrics and how do you value a player? What was traditionally seen as, this is what we're looking for. Really turning that on its head and looking at baseball from a new vantage point and evaluating it differently. I think it's fascinating.
Well, I have a lot to learn there, as I have grown in my appreciation of football, and I am now I love the game of football. And it's the more you understand, it's just true of anything in life, but there's just a lot to unpack with baseball. Football, I don't know, maybe I'm just biased. It seems simpler to get than baseball. There's a lot more to it. Maybe I've just been exposed more to it with my family and the sports.
I think it's probably exposure, because I'm the same as you. I'm all for football. I can't tell you who's good in baseball these days. I watched it when I was a kid. When I grew up in Ohio, I was a Cleveland Indians fan, but haven't really continued onto it. But it's been a pleasure to have both of you, Brian and Bob, and you gave a ton of good information. We're going to have some really long show notes, and I really appreciate you being here. To find Bob and Brian and Collide, you can go to collidemediagroup.com. If you want to learn more about the faith film space, make sure you hit faithfilmfan.com, and you can also find them in their podcast, which is also called Faith Film Fan. I'm sure they're on Apple and all the expected platforms.
Yeah. Yep. So thank you guys again for joining us and providing so much value. To our listeners, thank you for joining and spending this time. If you found value in this episode, please remember to like and subscribe. And also, we invite you to join Liberty Partnership Community at libertyspenders.com. And once again, learn more about our new book, Liberty Spenders. You can get it today for free at libertyspenders.com/free. Until next time.